In this video, we'll look at whether NCl3 is a polar or nonpolar molecule. So we'll start with the Lewis structure, we'll look at the molecular geometry, and then talk about why it's only slightly polar. So in our Lewis structure here, we see we have these three chlorine atoms, and they're bonded to the nitrogen. They're sharing these electron pairs here. And we have a lone pair up here. So that's our Lewis structure. We look at the nitrogen and the chlorine, the difference in electronegativity. Here's nitrogen 3.04, chlorine 3.16. That's a very small difference in electronegativity. So this bond here between the nitrogen and the chlorine, that's only going to be a very slightly polar bond. But we're interested in the molecule overall. So let's look at the molecular geometry for a second. So the purple here, that's the central nitrogen. We'll add three chlorine atoms. 1, 2, 3. You see they spread out to be as far away as they can from each other. And we still have that lone pair. So let's add that lone pair there. And you can see the lone pair, it pushes everything down, pushes those chlorine atoms down. This is called a trigonal pyramidal molecular geometry. So you can see the chlorines, they're kind of down here on the bottom. Here's our nitrogen with a lone pair. Let's look at the molecular surface to see whether this is polar or nonpolar. So here's our NCl3 molecule. We have our nitrogen in blue, the three chlorines. It doesn't show the lone pair, but you can see the effect. These have been pushed down. So we said the difference in electronegativity between the nitrogen and the chlorine was really small. So let's look at the surface of this molecule showing the polarity. And we can see on the top we have a little bit of a blue there and then this green here. So this really is just slightly polar. We have a little bit up here, the nitrogen, that's a little less electronegative, so this will be a little bit positive, maybe a little bit more negative down here. But in general, just slightly polar. If we looked at something like Nh3, where there was a bigger difference in electronegativity, that would look like this. So this is Nh3 Ammonia, and it has the same molecular geometry, that trigonal pyramidal there and the lone pair on top of the nitrogen. But look at the difference, this red here. The nitrogen is more electronegative than the hydrogen, so we see this red up here, which is more negative than the hydrogen's more positive. So this is a much more polar molecule than our NCl3. So in answer to our question, NCl3 is a slightly polar molecule. This is Dr. B, and thanks for watching.